And we're live.
I am Voltaire Basquiat, your host of this live stream. These are my two partner in crime, Voluntary Consumer, and Alexander the Great.
Hey, how you doing?
How's it going?
Yeah, pretty good.
Good.
Our main topic, then we might have different conversations along this stream continues, is democracy.
Oh
Uh,
boy, that's a fun one.
so, Alex, what's your thoughts on democracy?
Well, just out of curiosity, both of you guys are ANCAPs, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I kind of want to hear what your thoughts are on it first, to be honest, because I remember correctly, most ANCAPs kind of see democracy as like a tyranny of the majority, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, that's the exact wording we use for it.
But yeah, I'd kind of like to hear you guys flesh out on that a little, if you don't mind, first before I kind of jump in.
Oh.
I kind of ramble on it. Yeah, Voltaire, you want to go first?
Democracy. Come from the Greek word demos, strong, kratos. Well, kratos means strong, demos means people. I thought the stuff I've been reading at first in like democracy was used to be seen as an expletive, a bad thing due to the strong majority. We see it as Plato described it in Republican, and we view ANCAPs or libertarians view democracy in its pure form as mob ru- mob rule. No, you know, it's it allows many things to happen. Even we don't have mob rule. We have republics or neoliberal democracies, and we can see a lot of problems with that as well. Like the mass expansion of government, the the intrusion, um, are the slowly taking away people rights, natural rights away, and more intrusions into the free market enterprise that we love and fetishize so much.
Yeah, just about. If I could expand on that, I think one of the main examples of tyranny of the majority that people use these days, ANCAPs anyway, and libertarians, is 9 priests are on a desert island with a little girl. They vote on who gets raped. Does that justify the rape?
Okay, that's kind
That's
of
just the slightly humorous example.
yeah, I get what you're saying. So that's kind of an interesting way of like putting it, I guess. But let's see, I don't really understand the tyranny of the majority kind of thing because have either of you guys by any chance read the Dictator's Handbook?
No.
Say again?
Sorry, have any of you by any chance read the Dictator's Handbook?
No, not yet.
Okay, that's a really good book. I'd recommend you guys read that. Very interesting read. But I don't really see how the tyranny of the majority thing is valid, I would say, because I'm trying to think of how I want to word this. So, in the book, it basically talks about how governments are run. You have dictatorships, which are defined as like small coalition, which basically means when you're in power, you need people to keep you in power. You need people to back you, like the military and all that. If you follow me.
Is that like CPG Gray's video "Rules for Rulers," where he breaks down that even a dictator has people he depends on to stay in power?
I
Yeah,
remember seeing that.
that's basically the same thing. But yeah, and then you have the large coalition ones, which are democracies, which rely on having people, I guess, the people, keep you in power. And one of the things it talks about is that democracy and like large coalition governments kind of force people to run the government in like a way that benefits the people. So if you like can look at it like leaders have to provide basic things like good housing, decent housing conditions, water, more food, and it actually talks about like studies about this. Like you can look in a good example is I want to say New Guinea and Honduras. Like New Guinea is a much more richer country, but it's a dictatorship. And if you look at like the access to clean water and food, it's like 30%. But if you look at like Honduras, where it's like maybe I think their GDP per capita is like a third of New Guinea, but their access to clean water is about 90%, and it theorizes that this is because it's a democracy, and it talks about like a study where they found like the correlation between access to clean water and democracy is about 20% or something like that.
Well, ANCAP's kind of oppose democracy on more of a ideological level than, democracies haven't worked in the past. It's sort of like for instance, let's say 60% of America supports, I don't know, unfiltered, unregistered monitoring of all American citizens.
Sure.
Just some 1984 stuff. That doesn't justify the monitoring just because 60% or whatever voted for it.
Yeah, argumentation ad populum.
Right. That's really the basis of democracy, in the eyes of ANCAPs at least. I'm not going to speak for... But another major important thing is the majority, the largest group doesn't necessarily have to be over 50%. You can still have a minority ruling the majority in a democracy. Like, for instance, the largest party in the UK is 27% of the population or something like that.
Yeah.
There's 5 parties. The largest owns about 27%, and they dictate the majority of the laws. Through democracy, it's a minority leading the majority.
Okay, yeah, I can kind of see that, but so one of the reasons I personally like democracy is like those reasons that I mentioned before, and then I don't know, like I just feel like, I mean, I get what you're saying, but I feel like you have to. I feel like if I say this, we're gonna get into a debate more about whether or not like an ANCAP society can work. But you know what I'm saying? Like you have to prove that like this is a better alternative, I guess.
I kind of get what you're getting at there, but like ideologically speaking, just sticking to democracy, it's probably the best statist argument out there, but it's still flawed on the idea that a collective or a minority can supersede the natural rights of a person.
Yeah, I get what you're saying there, and I guess.
Plus, also, I think libertarians or ANCAPs don't really care what kind of government it is. We tend to measure how economically a country is, so we don't really care if it's a democracy or a dictatorship.
Well, yeah, a lot of libertarians have a blind following of Pinochet, but but he was a dictator.
Wait, is that the helicopter guy?
Yeah, that's the helicopter guy. the
Pinochet.
Say again.
Pinochet. Is that how you spell it? Is that how you pronounce his name?
Yeah.
Pinochet. It's a soft T, but it's like a. It's spelled like you would think it's Pinochet, but it's pronounced like a soft T.
Okay.
So I'm kind of curious. Like, I got a question that I'd like to pose to you. Like, in an ANCAP society, like, do you think like people would naturally evolve into like groups that would still basically function as governments, though?
We just under the Hoppian and anarcho-capitalist society, people eventually form their own communities, and Hans Herber Hoppe is the fiscal remove kind of guy, and people basically will sign these contracts saying these are the rules of the community as long as you say, here's how Hans Herber Hoppe say this. People who advocate for democracy, socialism, cynicism, and communism shall be physically removed.
That always made me laugh. It's one of those helicopter meme kind of things.
Yeah.
Yes. If I could add quick, I think one of the things that's often misunderstood about anarcho-capitalism is I think when people hear the word anarchy, for better or for worse, what comes to mind is just mass lawlessness, people shooting each other in the streets. That's the idea they have. They hear that word, they just freak out. In an ANCAP most, if not all, the services that are traditionally provided by government would be present. So society wouldn't necessarily look a lot different. It's just that they'd be privately funded instead of, funded by force through taxation.
My 2 cents, busting in with a big set with a really good point.
Thank you.
So from what I can understand, you're basically saying that like there would still kind of be like a governments almost, but like you'd be more consenting to it. Like there's no.
Yeah, it's voluntary. No one's gonna throw you in a cage for not paying for security.
Okay.
Let's just think I think one of the most one of my main problem with neoliberal democracies, even though they're more prosperous in today's and current society, just we like as a libertarian, we kind of oppose things like progressive taxation and and welfare, which does cause cuts, which cause a moral hazard as well. Well, that's more due to the culture of things, but I digress on that. But
now I should mention that it does vary widely from school to school of libertarianism and ANCAPism. Like some people just think that there would be nothing like that, and you just have to pay for all your services yourself.
Yeah.
It really varies depending on who you're talking to.
Okay, yeah, I'm starting to kind of get it. Well, so
like that guy T, for instance, he'd probably tell you that there'd just be a voluntary government, while someone like maybe Esoteric Entity would be more of the school of you pay for all your services, but competition would drive the services prices so far down that you'd be able to afford them all in the first place.
Okay, yeah. So, quick question: you guys know that like that thought experiment with the like people pay for like fire services, and then like if you pay for your own fire services, you kind of have to pay for the person next to you, and so on and so forth. So that's kind of more of a straw man from what I'm understanding from what we're hearing you guys talk, I guess.
I'm not desperately familiar with that. I've heard it mentioned. I'm not.
I think if I'm not mistaken, I think what you're referring to is what they're saying. Suppose your house lights on fire and you have fire insurance. In the process, your neighbor's house gets lit on fire. He doesn't have fire insurance. The firefighters are going to show up. Are they going to put out the fire at your house and leave your neighbor to burn because he doesn't have fire insurance? That's is that where you're going with the challenge?
Yeah, it's the way I was trying to pose it is slightly different. It was more like your neighbor's house catches fire, and that's a threat to your house.
Okay,
I think I see what you're getting at.
Yeah. So that, from what I'm understanding, you guys saying, it's more kind of a straw man, because would there still be like collective things in like these voluntary governments, or?
Once again, it just really depends on who you're talking to. Like, for instance, if Esoteric Entity were here, he'd probably tell you that the guy who didn't have fire insurance would probably pay to have his fire put out after it gets put out.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and I would say, like, quickly, I have a close friend who works in a hospital, and like what he says, he can confirm all the time is if somebody gets rushed into a hospital, almost dying, doesn't have insurance, the hospital's still going to treat him. And then on the backside, he'll probably have to pay for it. But I mean, they'll work that out after they've saved his life. It's not like they're going to say, "Oops, sorry, no insurance, not going to save your life."
Yeah, obviously.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of that one scene from Breaking Bad. I think it's the very first episode where he's having a heart attack in the ambulance, but he's trying to convince them to drop him off because he can't pay for it. Oh, I just crashed. Give me a minute.
What's going on?
I think Volunteers, he said he crashed. He has to get back on.
Got disconnected or something.
Yeah.
No.
Whose channel is this?
Sorry, I was
on yours.
Sorry, I was distracted.
Whose channel is this on, by the way? I never asked.
My channel.
Okay. Yeah, how have you been doing lately? You been making any new videos or anything? I haven't talked to you in a bit, actually.
What?
I said, how's your channel been doing lately? I haven't really looked at it.
Been doing okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I haven't been working on my blog that much lately. I've been busy with classes and everything. I got that gun control post, but that's going to take forever to research.
Yeah. What's your research so far on gun control? Actually, come and think of it, that reminds me of that reminds me of a podcast that Ben Shapiro had on the Las Vegas shooting. Actually, he said the reason why we don't have a pure direct democracy because the majority changes like pretty much every week. The reason why we have a republic is that people can think this through. If we have a direct democracy, people will probably ban all guns. So we have a republic. People will be will think about what's actually going on.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty interesting, to be honest.
Yeah, but I haven't really done a ton of research yet. I'm reading through a book on statistics just so I know how to interpret stuff better. I still haven't gotten through that, and then I have about 10 studies I got to read, and then I'll be able to start writing.
Ah, that sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah, it sounds awful.
Yeah, it takes research though. I'm sure it'll be a good product once you're done.
Yeah.
Are you like pro gun control?
I don't have an opinion on it, actually. That's why I'm doing it. I've never looked into it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we'll see.
Have you ever read Hans Eberhard?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that? Hello?
I haven't. Not yet.
Yeah, Hans Eberhard, he's like kind of like the meme on the libertarian community for advocating physical removal, but I've been reading some of his stuff and he's pretty impressive. I probably should read Democracy, the Guy That Failed, because when I read it so far, he explains under a democratic government, politicians, due to their higher time preference, will expand their government over time. And he said a monarchy would be a much preferable alternative due to ideally a king having a much lower time preference due to the estate being his primary source of income. So he wants to basically make the most money as he can through his privately owned government, unlike a publicly owned government, i.e. a democratic government.
Wait, so he's saying in that book that monarchy would be preferable to a democracy?
Yeah, it's the book is like 330 pages, and just so far I'm reading it is actually pretty good.
I'll have to give that a look sometime. I just kind of disagree with that on the basis of the large coalition, small coalition thing.
This thing just does that make sense for a democratic politician? Make sense to actually expand the power of the government due to their higher time preference?
Not particularly, because like I was saying, like a democracy, from what I've read, forces people to kind of run the government in favor of the people.
Yes, government is based in essentially aggressive force.
Like when you say in favor of the people, that means public opinion that the government should do what the people will do the people will, right? Is that what you're saying?
I mean, kind of, yeah. What I'm getting at is that, like, in order for a politician, like a democracy, to get votes, he can't just take away, like, he has to provide certain things like access to clean water, access to food, or else people are going to not vote for him. And then there's like another thing too, like he has to be able to provide good treatment, and like in the case of a natural disaster, you can look at this too. There's some study that says like democracies, like they have way less people die in natural disasters.
Is it due to the economic system?
It could be. I mean, there's a correlation between democracy and just less deaths, I think, during natural disasters, because they do.
How are they defining democracy, though? I can't believe that was talking about pure democracy. I mean,
let me find the thing.
thing. Just that's the thing. What I'm getting at is happen under this hype. I'm just giving a hypothetical. Happen since we have a democratic government and it's kind of forcing the people to do what happens. What happens if they want to? Let's happen. What happens if they want to lynch somebody or take away people guns away? Will this democratic government will have to do that or just ignore that due to the will of the people? Or I'm just strawmanning you.
One second. Let me find the study real quick. You guys can keep talking about something while I look for it.
This thing just. Sorry.
Yeah. This might take a bit. One sec.
No one's gonna answer my question.
Well, I'm sorry. Can you
really
repeat the
paying
question?
attention to it that much.
Yeah, repeat the question, please.
Okay. You said that under democratic governments, people be like the people almost be forcing the government to do what they want, do as they will.
Well, yes, I think that's true. I mean, when you
but that's. Sorry, go on.
In a pure you have to be careful in these discussions about democracy. I mean, I'm always inclined to talk about pure democracy, which is the majority rules, but I can't think of any modern government that actually has a pure democracy. They have the Republican form of government with democratic elections of representatives, but a pure everyone from the founding fathers said that the founding fathers themselves said the problem with pure democracy is it's two wolves and a lamb voting on what's for dinner. And even in the democratically elected republic, the problem is that as soon as people figure out that they can vote themselves stuff, that will be the end of the government, because once people realize if I vote for this politician, he's promising to give me more free stuff than that politician. Nowadays, whether you're a Democrat, whether you're a Republican, it doesn't matter. If you don't promise people free stuff, you're not going to get elected, and that's one of the major problems.
The tragedy of the commons. I forgot about the trash. That's probably one of the biggest criticisms of modern democracy is the tragedy of the commons. Actually.
I'm not familiar with that.
The tragedy of the commons?
Mm-mm.
Okay, in simple terms, under a resource economy, and like my 2 cents said, when people want something more of it, and when a singular entity wants it, like say a government will give that to a certain group of people. People say, I want more free stuff. I want more progressive taxation on the 1%, and that's the thing. That's in simple terms, the tragedy of the commons.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's in one of my most recent videos called "What is Democratic Socialism?" That was the point I was making. Is currently in America, the lowest income bracket pays no income tax whatsoever. But if you think about it, when they vote, they vote. They vote for someone like Bernie Sanders. People who pay no income tax at all are voting to raise the taxes on those that do pay income tax. I mean, in what world does that sound? I mean, and it makes sense because they want free stuff. But as in what world does that make sense? How does that sound fair?
It's not fair.
What happened to voluntary consumer?
I just saw on Twitter. He said, "Darn the Texas Wi-Fi."
Ha!
Oh.
That's pretty.
Okay, I think I'm in the section of the book where it talks about it. I'm still looking for it. Sorry.
I've been bringing esoteric entity.
He wants to join?
I believe he said he did. Yeah, about 16 minutes ago he said he did.
Cool.
Good. So do you think our...
Go ahead.
Like, you think our Alexander, you think our problem with our democracy is more so on a superficial level, if anything else?
I mean, my problem with it is one, like you'd have to convince me, because you know me, I'm a statist. You'd have to basically convince me that one, an ANCAP society can work, and two, I'm still the voluntary government thing still gets me. Like, I don't see what's preventing a tragedy of the commons from happening in a voluntary government. Is it just the difference that you're technically consenting to it?
Well, yes, there's that, but you also there can be no initiation of force against the citizens by the government. With taxation, taxation is just a legalized form of theft, and I've heard people try to. You try to argue against this, but think about it. If somebody holds a gun to your head and says, "Give me your money," that's called theft. If you don't pay your taxes, men with guns come and take it from you. Now, there are some you certainly can argue that it's a necessary evil, and some people do argue that. But nonetheless, taxation is theft. I think the difference would be in an ANCAP society, no one could be forced to pay if they didn't want to, and if they did. Yeah, because it's voluntary. So what prevents a tragedy of the commons? Well, the fact that you can't steal from people even if you vote to do it.
Wait, couldn't people just consent to being taxed though? I'm still not wrapping my head around this.
Well, consent that's called paying for a service. If I consent to being taxed, that means I'm voluntarily giving my money to someone in exchange for a service. So that's not taxation. That's just the exchange of goods in a free market.
So by the way you're defining like paying for a service, you're basically saying, like, say you have like a voluntary government and then you like consent to being taxed to provide services. Even if those services don't go to you, that's still what you would say is buying like a product almost.
If the services don't go to you, what services are you referring to? What I hear there is you're saying there are some services you'd be voluntarily paying for even though you didn't use them. What would that be?
Like say, in a voluntary government, say you have like a community firefighting, but you don't ever use that, but you're still like paying into it because you're consenting.
Well, yes, I think that would be ideally. We don't want our houses on fire. So we wouldn't want to have to use it, but it's. You pay for it so that you're covered beforehand. In a voluntary society, if you didn't pay for the fire department and they had save you anyways, then you'd have to pay on the back end. And it would be more expensive.
Yeah. Okay. I think we talked about that earlier, I guess.
Yeah. So I think I'm seeing what you're saying a little.
I'd say the consequences are pretty harsh for taxation.
Yeah.
Get a lien on, and if you don't pay that, then there'll be like another warning or something, and then men with guns may come to your house.
Also, here's another problem with democracy. It's the thing. It's got me thinking of social justice, which is sort of like democratic justice. I just got a book called The Housing Boom and Bust by Thomas Sowell, and he stated that it's due to Republicans who are trying to push more housing onto the people, and we all know what happened after the fact.
What's going on?
Are you talking about the housing crisis?
Yeah.
Hang on, quick. Esoteric's in here. Let's quick rephrase what question we're discussing so that he can jump in.
They're just discussing about democracy, whether it's a good thing or a bad thing. Whether it's the best form.
Well, yeah, but you were talking about the 2008 housing crisis, I think.
Yeah, that happened due to the housing bubble, the housing boom and bust thing. That happened due to people trying to figure out these people deserve housing. These egalitarian thinking. That's
no, it absolutely wasn't. It was caused by I forgot what the law was called, but yeah, it was caused by a bill signed into law which allowed for banks to take out loans which they didn't have to back up.
Well, so, technically, it required if I'm not mistaken, it required banks to give out loans to people, even if they didn't have the necessary credit to be able to pay them back. And essentially,
Federal Reserve Act.
Yeah, and the government-run Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae essentially said if the loans go bad, the government will bail you out.
Yeah, exactly.
And it happened up to the point, and like it was like 2 or 3 banks failed, and they did bail them out. But then I think it was Lehman Brothers failed. The government did not bail them out. And then when everyone saw that they didn't get bailed out, a bank run ensued. Everyone was afraid more banks were going to fail, and they ran off to take all their money out of the bank. All the banks said, I mean, holy cow, there's going to be a.
Sorry, I just what book I have right now, The Housing Boom and Bust. He said that is more due to our Congress trying to push more people into housing, into more housing.
Well, yeah,
that's a very oversimplified explanation of it, but yeah, that's essentially what it was.
I know, and you can look up like President Bush's speeches several years prior, talking about how we need to help Americans get homes, and that's kind of. I agree with Esoteric. He's saying that's oversimplified, but I mean that's how they sold it. We need to get.
Yeah, just that's the thing, no.
Yeah.
Oh, just. So how's everybody's day so far?
I gotta
good.
go to work in like a half hour, so.
Okay. Well, I was traveling for the past few days, so it's good to be home.
Yeah, I got home not too long ago from being out food shop.
Also, the reason why I started this stream because I've been called a fascist, sexist, because I've been called a fascist, sexist when I say I don't believe in democracy.
Well, in today's day and age, you'll get called a fascist and a sexist if you're not a liberal, no matter what.
Yeah, so. I don't think there's a single person here. Even Alex over there has probably been called a fascist, and I don't even know what he believes. He's just here so he's not a social justice warrior.
Also, I've been called a sexist because I said women shouldn't vote.
Well, nobody should vote, so.
Yeah,
But the funny thing is, if in a social justice society, even if for some reason the government said women shouldn't vote, shouldn't the SJW say, fine, all we have to do is identify as men when we go to the polls, and then we can identify whatever we want after that?
Well, that's exactly the fucking point. What, like, in a democracy, what happens to the people who say, I don't want to vote, or I don't, in a direct democracy, or I don't think there should be a system that's in place that, allows people to control my entire life through a majority vote. Oh, well, then, it's so easy to poke holes in democracy as a quote-unquote free system that honestly, most people just haven't put much thought into it, I think.
Actually, one of the biggest lies of the democracy that somehow creates the freedom. Admittedly, I have to admit that people who have neoliberal democracies tend to be more economically more free than other countries, but democracy itself does not create the freedom. Like I said before,
democracy.
Well, not the freedom that they think they want.
It's not the democracy that makes their society more prosperous. In fact, the democracy is the direct threat to the society's prosperity.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Just maybe this.
The only freedom that voters really have is the freedom to oppress each other.
Yeah, and I think I'm trying to think of. There's a quote from one of the founding fathers. I can't remember which one, but it's prior to the American Revolution when they were discussing whether or not to revolt against Great Britain. Someone posed the question. They said, "Why should I trade one tyrant 3,000 miles away for 3,000 tyrants less than a mile away?" And
yeah, that's a good point.
A good quote.
I think the philosopher who just completely killed democracy as a concept, like he absolutely put the nail in the coffin, was, of course, Lysander Spooner.
Yeah.
No treason just killed democracy. After you read that, there's just no argument for it anymore.
Yeah, what's Lysander's argument?
Well, his argument is not only, what was just proposed here, but it's also that democracy in and of itself is not a voluntary system, because in a system of mob rule, the people, the majority who assumes the rule, since they are allowed to rule by that very nature, what you're doing is you're allowing a majority to defy the self-ownership of a entire group of people, therefore enslaving the people who are not the majority who lost in the vote. So not only is it not free, but it's also not voluntary, because he also proposed the concept of like a defense vote. Some people vote to try and defend their rights, but of course that's
also just it seems like more democratic governments tend to pervert their constitutions more often or not.
Well, that wasn't his point.
I just adding that point.
His point was that, okay, for example, if I'm on my property and I want to have a certain number of trees on my property, but somebody proposes a city ordinance in town hall that says there can only be a certain number of trees in people's yards, and the amount of trees I want to put in my yard would exceed what the city ordinance says people can have in their yards. Well, that would be a law directly in defiance to my property rights, and my property rights stem from self-ownership. So say that law gets passed, okay. Well, now I'm being oppressed by the majority vote because my self-ownership has been denied.
Can I jump in real quick?
Of course.
This is a little slightly off topic, but you remember how we were talking about these sort of voluntary governments? I'm still not understanding what could prevent what's supposed to prevent those from eventually devolving into like mob rule by any chance? Yes.
Okay, quick answer to your question. I think what you're saying, you still keep using the term voluntary government. I think that's kind of an oxymoron, but you're saying in an ANCAP society, what prevents it from...
That's what I'm referring to, yeah.
Okay, what prevents it from devolving into mob rule?
Yeah.
Okay, well, I would answer to answer the question. I think one thing I do want to be careful about is I think like communists are very commonly present their argument like saying if we just adopted a communist society, everything would be perfect. And I think unfortunately some people view ANCAPs as thinking if we just had an ANCAP society, everything would be perfect. I mean, I believe an ANCAP society is much preferable to what we have, although I do admit it wouldn't be perfect and there would be inherent dangers. One inherent danger of an ANCAP society is that if the people get lazy and stop protecting their personal rights, then yes, a government could take over. So I guess the weakness of an ANCAP society is it does depend on people taking their property rights seriously and protecting themselves from oppressors. If people just got lazy and stopped doing that, then yes, the society would be overrun. But
that's the thing with an ANCAP society, though, is that as a society, it sort of forces you to not be lazy. And forces you to look out for yourself. So, I mean, I just what were you saying? Sorry.
I think that for a civilized people to exist, we need there would have to be room for both people who are both compassionate and intelligent. One virtue without the other brings disaster.
Well,
ANCAP society need to be a high trust society. That's what you're saying.
I think it depends on exactly what danger to the society you're talking about. Because the danger to the society, that's sort of ambiguous. But to be fair, he did lay out specifically like a mob rule taking over. Well, yeah. I mean, the thing that you need to that this argument doesn't take into account is something called an emergent property, which has and can be observed empirically. And that is when people essentially form a voluntary sort of collective of a group in self-defense in this case based on combined self-interest, and then would quickly disband. So to put it simply, let's say for example a tyrant did emerge. A corporation managed to amass an army of about 10,000 people, and we'll say the entire world is ANCAP in this situation, just because this is assuming this is a fully anarchist society. Well, that corporation, that one entity with like 10,000 soldiers would be up against billions of people. Billions. So when you take emergent properties into consideration, the argument just it falls apart due to sheer impracticality.
Mm-hmm. And like I was saying earlier, the only way that tyrant, his corporation could succeed is if the people didn't fight back. But I don't, in an ANCAP, like Esoteric was saying, in an ANCAP society, it would already be well understood you have a right to defend yourself. So unless he could somehow succeed in scaring billions of people into thinking they shouldn't fight back, and admittedly, in theory that's possible, but I can't see how he'd be able to succeed at doing it.
There's billions of us, and there's a few thousand of them. So it's really not.
Strength in numbers.
I don't see what's preventing what I'm not understanding is how the issue of democracy cannot apply to that same situation. So say you were saying that, just in case I don't want to strawman you, Esoteric, but you were saying that there's nothing for those corporations to convince people to not fight back. You were saying that?
Well, no, that was me. I was saying that if the tyrant who had risen in Ancapistan, if somebody wants to essentially overthrow Ancapistan and create and put himself in charge, create a new state, the only way he could do that is if he had enough force to overcome people defending themselves, protecting their property rights. Now, I said in theory, if he could somehow convince everyone that he's so big and tough that if they try to fight back, they'll just lose their lives, so that everybody, voluntarily gives him their stuff, then yes, he could successfully overthrow the ANCAP society and install himself as a dictator. But what I'm saying is I can't imagine, in an ANCAP society, I can't imagine how he would do that, because everyone would be armed. Everyone would know they have the right to defend themselves against the initiation of force. And there's thousands, like Esoteric was saying, there's thousands of them. There's billions of everyone else. And even if we want to scale that down, a smaller ANCAP society, there's 100 of them and there's 1,000 of everyone else. The point still stands.
Well, what's preventing the tyrant from just convincing them that they'll just provide stuff for them if they just let them govern? I guess this is the issue you guys have with democracy. I still don't see how that doesn't apply to an ANCAP society.
Well, I see your point, but my question to you is, how would he do that? In a society where everyone has, the right to self-ownership, the right to their own property, they don't have to, he would have to convince them that they need him for some reason, that they shouldn't fight back. And I'm asking you, yes, that's possible in theory, but how would he do it? What would he do to convince them just voluntarily give him their rights?
I'm really thinking of how I want to phrase this. It just seems like it would almost happen exactly like you would see in a democracy. They just say, "Oh, the rich is up against you. The greedy capitalist will take money from the rich and provide for the poor," something like that. I don't see how that still just wouldn't apply to a.
Are you just worried that parasitism is just going to happen in Ancapistan?
I'm sorry. That what would happen?
Parasitism, because you seem like you're describing that.
Sorry, repeat the question one more time.
Are you just worried about parasitism?
I'm not exactly 100% sure what you mean by that.
Parasites, you're just saying that anarcho-capitalist stand will be more vulnerable to more corruption?
Oh, no, I don't think an ANCAP society will get rid of that problem, is what I'm saying.
Okay, are you saying there will still be lazy people who would rather receive welfare than work? Is that what you're saying?
Basically, yeah.
Okay, well, what I would say to that is, and I think the problem in our society is people can get away with being lazy because they'll receive welfare, even if they, like one thing that was just shown in Alabama, they under the Obama administration there was requirements for who they had welfare to. After the Obama administration ended, Alabama instituted a change in their food stamps policy, and basically what it said was, if you are an able-bodied you are an able-bodied adult without dependents. In other words, if you are fully capable of working, you had to have a job, but still demonstrate that you needed food stamps. After they did that, food stamps rolls dropped 85%. So what that says is that 85% of the people who were on food stamps weren't on food stamps because they couldn't find a job. They were on food stamps because they were choosing not to work so that they could receive welfare. And in ANCAP society, basically, here's how it works. Either you contribute to society or you starve. I mean, if in an ANCAP society, you would have the freedom to just sit on your butt and do nothing if that's what you wanted to do, but you would also starve to death. And I feel like basically self-interest would compel people to work because they couldn't get away with being lazy.
Well, and I kind of disagree that like a worker starve thing would exist in an ANCAP society, because I mean there'd probably be some form of private charity.
Well, there would be private charities, but I mean it would be up to those private charities. They would make their own rules. It wouldn't be government mandated about who gets money.
So what's to prevent people from like being dependent on those, and then one, not contributing to society, and then two, wanting more of that from, say, a state?
Okay, well, what prevents them from becoming dependent on the private charity? That would be up to the private charity. Like if I run a private charity, it's to me to decide who gets money. If I voluntarily give my money to a lazy person who doesn't want to work, that's on me. If I just keep giving money to lazy people when they saw they weren't trying to get a job, it wouldn't be to help them get back on their feet. They're just living off of it. I don't think they'd continue giving money to such a person, but even if they did, that's on them, not anyone else. Yeah, and was there another part to your question?
Yeah, so I was saying, okay, so you answered the part about I forget what. One second, I just lost my train of thought. Oh yeah, so
okay.
You answered my question about what is to prevent people from being dependent on private charity. You answered that question, but my second part of the question was, what's to prevent those people from wanting more of that from, say, a state? I just still am not wrapping my head around how this problem would be solved in ANCAPistan by any chance.
Well, they might want it, but they wouldn't. The only way they could achieve it is by initiating force against someone else. They'd have to steal it themselves, since there's no government to do it for them. And as soon as they did that, they violate the NAP. Well,
yeah, so that's what I was saying back in my theoretical. Like, if a government was trying to take over, and you were saying the only way they could do that is that they could convince people not to fight. I mean, what I was saying is they could convince people not to fight by just making promises and saying, "Oh, we'll provide free stuff."
Well, I guess the point, all I'm going to say to that is I think, and to some degree, that's a valid criticism in that if they could do that, then they would succeed. I just don't think that an ANCAP society would lend itself to that enough people like that being produced for them to be successful.
I was at lunch. What was said?
Okay, but basically, well, first the question was asked. It was brought up, would private charities still exist in an ANCAP society? And the answer was yes. So then the question was asked, well, what would prevent people who didn't want to work from becoming dependent on private charities, just like they're on welfare? And my answer to that was, well, I mean, in theory, that could happen, but the difference is a private charity. If I run a private charity, it's up to me to decide who gets money. So if I see a lazy person just mooching off the charity, I can choose to cut him off. If I don't choose to cut him off, that's on me. It's I could choose to do that, but I'm not taking other people's money and allowing people to mooch. It's my money.
All right.
But then Alex, you can go ahead and ask your next question again.
The question you just answered, or
after that you asked another question, so just bring us to Eric.
My second follow-up to that was what is preventing those people from wanting more welfare from a government trying to take over? So this is how I was saying how a government could take over, is you were saying that the government would have to convince people like not to fight back or be able to take over. And you said, obviously it's going to be hard for them to take over by force. So I rebutted by saying that they could just honestly, there's nothing preventing them from just convincing people who want more free stuff, I guess, to not fight back. Or just promising more free stuff, I guess.
Yeah, the difference between the explanation of an emergent property and a democracy is that in a democracy, the system in and of itself functions based on a system of mob rule. In a emergent property, the mob collective, whatever you want to call it, forms as a direct consequence of something threatening that group of people's bottom line, their lifestyle. So it's not a systemic thing. It's not something which would exist as a system. It's like, for example, do you remember I don't remember. I think it was Delta Airlines, whichever one it was, where they beat up that doctor and threw him off.
I think it was United.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, United. And,
is it bad that I laughed when he just screamed?
So yeah, United Airlines did that, and then people took their business elsewhere. In other words, they voted with their dollar. Well, voting with their wallet is an example of an emergent property, at least when it comes to the market. But yeah, we've seen, like, with the American Revolution, emergent properties definitely have existed in the past before, where people do things which don't have, like, there is sort of, they are individual people, but they group together in response to something all threatening their lifestyle in the exact same way.
Okay.
So that's the distinction between a democracy and an emergent property. So I think the idea that a government can form out of emergent property is it just doesn't make any sense.
No, that wasn't my point. My point was that a government trying to take over, like, let me make sure I understand this. So if a government tried to take over, you're saying an emergent property would, like, prevent that, like, it would fight back against that.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay, so my point was trying to say that what's to prevent a government from just being able to convince the emergent property to never form in the first place? Like, so if I was example saying, like, the government could just convince people, like, hey, if you let us take over, we'll provide free stuff to you. Like, I don't see what's preventing that from happening. And that's the same issue you guys have with democracy, and I don't see how anarcho-capitalism can fix that. That's what I'm saying.
Okay, and I think maybe I think you've put your finger on the fact that I don't think any of us would ever claim that an ANCAP society is completely immune from overthrow.
Oh yeah,
I mean, in theory that could happen, but what Esoteric's trying to explain to you is it would be in an ANCAP, the way an ANCAP society is structured would make that so incredibly difficult that it's not likely that it would happen. Is it possible that it could happen? I suppose, but I think people in an ANCAP society understand value their freedom. It won't happen, even if in theory it could happen.
I don't know. I think you're just. I think you're making the assumption that people would just know that they would value their freedom. I think that entire argument is just based on an assumption. If you get what I'm saying.
Okay, but I think but yours is based on an assumption as well. So the question would just be, is it?
Well, there's a difference. I mean, you have to consider the kind of assumption that's being made. Is it a baseless assumption or an assumption created by a logical inference? And the argument that the anarcho-capitalist society there would value their freedom is not a baseless assertion. And it's one that's founded on a logical inference that, for the society to exist, people have to be independent, and they would see their societies developing at a greater rate compared to all that of human history.
Education
And-
would have to improve a lot.
Well, I mean, it would, because in that society, education has a incentive behind it. But anyway,
And
the point
get
that I was
some
getting at,
ecological warfare out of it.
and assumptions like the one that you're making, that a government is just going to form and convince people that anarcho-capitalism is a bad thing. Well, I mean,
That's the
yeah,
power vacuum excuse.
it's entirely possible that that could happen, but you
Or
know,
those
what
people be
what is the
completely
base
removed.
for what's the base for that happening? Like, what is going to lead one to believe that that will happen, or that you know, something won't happen to stop that? Well, nothing. So it's sort of it's a baseless assumption, essentially. And that
Well-
sort of goes, that's sort of the same with a lot of these outlandish arguments against it, like, oh, there's just going to be an army that's going to take everyone over, or there's going to be Acme missiles fired at everybody. I don't think there's ever anyone's ever proposed that, but I mean, it gets that bad sometimes with how far some statist arguments have to stretch.
And I think empirical evidence against that is, after the collapse of the USSR, their hypothetical plans for invading the United States were declassified. And what it turned out was that the Soviet generals, not a single plan to invade the United States involved crossing the state line into Texas. And they specifically said the reason they wouldn't go about invading the United States was even a fully armed mechanized Soviet brigade would suffer too heavy losses because Texans are so well armed. So
Yeah.
I mean, I'd say that's empirical evidence that when you've got a free armed society, even the strongest army is afraid.
Yeah.
Possibly. Again, I would say that's also dependent on the fact people would want to work together, like specifically work together, I guess, to fight off this offending army. Like, I don't see how, like, there wouldn't be like groups that would be infighting while this army was trying to invade, I guess.
Mhm.
All right, well, I'm sorry, but I gotta go. It's time. I gotta go to work. So see you.
Yeah,
Have a
what time
good
is it
day
actually?
at work.
It's about 4:30. Yeah, I'm probably gonna have to drop out too, because I mean, we're kind of just getting the rabbit hole right now. So
Okay. Well, I would say if this is getting to the end, I think I'm gonna say I think you've raised some valid points. But what I would say is the next time we have a discussion like this, if you can if you gets put together some empirical examples, like actual historical examples that lead you to believe that this is, because this happened in such and such society, you think this shows very strongly that this would happen almost immediately in an ANCAP society, or inevitably in an ANCAP society, whichever you prefer to argue for.
okay, yeah, sure, definitely. I mean, that'll probably have to be in a while because I'm working on my gun control post. But
Problem.
yeah,
I guess I'm at the moment looking through my list of I try to keep up my schedule 3 videos a week. Maybe I'll make one talking about some of the things you proposed. We'll see. I've got a few things in my to do, but
okay, yeah, we can definitely.
This
do that
is
sometime,
Steve.
so.
This is Soul
I'm gonna
Drift.
drop out then.
Awesome
Okay.
Resident Evil fan.
Hello?
thank you.
Hey.
Hello.
What's your thoughts on democracy, dude? Oh, it's been a while.
Yeah, well, it's been about a month. I just moved to a new place.
How's your life, dude?
It'll be a lot better, let's just say that.
Sorry, man. What's your thoughts on democracy, dude?
Well, as I said before, I think we talked about this before. I don't think it's a good idea. I think if you want freedom and if you're going to have a government system, not an anarchist system, the best way is a republic, not a democracy. So I think a democracy is ultimate failure.
Yeah, just democracy. Well, is a failure, along with republics, because it always got pervert. Because the state must maintain existence by perverting the foundation that's set on. A prime example I'm thinking of, the United States of America, is because I honestly think the founding fathers will be disgusted how big the American government is.
Oh, they absolutely would. If you read the Federalist Papers, what we've got today is absolutely the very things they were trying to prevent. But I would say quick about on the issue of republics. I think republics retain the same problems democracy does. They simply slow down how fast it erodes.
Yeah, it's the problem of decivilizaation. With democracy, you get a quicker the decivilizational effect, but republic is just slowed down the inevitable.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it also depends. And it also depends what kind of republic do you want.
What about a Roman Republic?
No.
How bad was a Roman Republic was?
Almost as bad as the Empire.
Oh. Did you? What republic you suggest in that live chat?
A free market republic or a Burke-style republic. You know, Edmund Burke, a Burke conservative style republic. You know I'm a conservative, right? I'm not an ANCAP.
I know.
Don't get me wrong. If we were to go into anarchist society, I would obviously choose the anarcho-capitalist society because I've argued with ANCOMs and it just doesn't make any sense. Like, why would you have communism, which is complete totalitarianism, and anarchism, which is no government whatsoever? Why would you want to put those two together?
Yeah. Leftists and their habit of taking two different viewpoints and trying to combine them together.
Yeah, and I'd say leftists have too high of an opinion of humanity. I mean, I think in anarcho-communism could only work if everyone was, if everyone in the society was completely selfless, completely morally good, you know, could think of nothing but how he might help his neighbor. I mean, if that was a society, then maybe it would work. But, I mean, get real. That's just not us.
That's the thing with leftist mindsets. It's just an egalitarianism. That's probably one of the most problems with democracy. When you have politicians like Bernie Sanders promoting egalitarianism or social justice, that's kind of lead the downfall of society because you are creating a moral hazard and actually a horrible culture.
A bunch of caring idiots.
Yeah. It's like you can't have anarchism and communism at the same time because like I know people had this argument like back and forth, well, you need a government to have one, a government to have the other. Well, the thing is, if you want like social justice and wealth redistribution, I seriously doubt that can be achieved without a government. Like even if it were to be achieved, not that it ever successfully happens. When you look at Mao's China or Stalin's USSR or whatever.
Mao's China is definitely is a disaster.
Yeah. But be careful how you say that.
Say what?
How you talk about Mao.
Mao's China was a disaster. It's quite possibly one of the most humanitarian crises that the world has ever seen in the 20th century.
And the guy killed more people than what, Hitler and Joseph Stalin combined?
Yeah.
It's funny. I've always been amazed. You know, Hitler was evil. I will give you that. But you know, Hitler killed 6 million Jews. But if you look at Stalin, Mao, and Pol Pot, collectively they murdered more than 100 million. So Hitler pales in comparison.
This is why I think fascism is a lesser of two evil compared to communism.
I hate them both.
Me too.
Yeah.
I lost family to the swastika.
I lost family to the rope.
Yeah.
Just saying.
I know.
Just like lynchings. Like isn't that democracy right there? A lynch mob.
Yep.
Yeah. I said my favorite quote is democracy is 2 wolves and a lamb voting on what's for dinner.
Just like that's the thing. That's the thing with most commies or Marxists because they think that people are going to vote what they consider to be the best for the collective. But the thing is, the reality is, people in democracy will vote with their self-interest.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Which is why self-interest is the universal reality that makes capitalism the only workable economic system, because it's the only system where your self-interest forces you to serve other people's self-interest.
Another thing about a republic, as I was saying earlier, is, like I said, I know some people who claim they're for democracy may claim they're for it, but they don't seem to be as concerned. Like, whereas republics, well, maybe it's just because I talk to, small government constitutionalists in America. They talk about the best thing about a republic is that, unlike democracies, where if the entire country says so, then that's it. Like, for example, like when you have elections, whatever the popular vote says, that's what's important. Like, it doesn't matter what this small town here thinks. What matters what the people in New York and LA think. It doesn't matter what the people in Carlisle, Ohio think.
Yeah, that's why we got the Electoral College. But thank God.
But it seems like people who want democracy or like the majority rule, it seems like that's what they think elections should be all about. So it's like, okay, well, the people of New York and Los Angeles and Chicago, all three major cities want this. But what about all these little small towns that don't want it?
Well, it's just the funny thing is, though, I mean, so Donald Trump wins the 2016 election, and suddenly all the liberals are like, the Electoral College is stupid. We need the popular vote. But God knows if Donald Trump had won the popular vote, if Hillary Clinton had won the Electoral College, they would have been singing the praises about how wonderful the Electoral College is and why we need it in America.
Or they blame Russia.
Or they'd blame Russia. I mean, it's...
never mind. I was
going to... to be honest, the Russian narrative hacking is a joke.
Here's what I will say. Here's what I will say about Russia. Like, let's just say they did have something to do with the election. I can guarantee you it was not in favor for Donald Trump. It was probably more in favor for Hillary. Main reason why is because she sold uranium to them.
If you listen to Nero Rome and his lie, they'll say that's Russian propaganda.
Yeah. It's funny. The first video I put on YouTube a couple months ago was called "Why is Russian Meddling a Big Deal?" And the point I made in that was, I guarantee you, every country in the world that has some sort of vested interest in the United States of America did something to try and influence the election, whether it was just put out a message that tried to sway American voters or whether it was downright messing with it. But, I mean, get real. The Saudis donated millions of dollars to the Clinton Foundation. How was that not, quote unquote, meddling based on this definition that the media has been using? It's just ridiculous.
Yeah.
This thing is like, I never did believe in this narrative, and it seemed like it's a borderline conspiracy theory.
See, Atomic ANCAP has just joined us. Hello.
And I said you should not join my stream. What's up, ANCAP?
Are you still there?
Hey, you there?
Hello?
Yeah. So, which is the best kind of republics? What about a John Locke Republican-style government?
I would just say an Edmund Burke-style republic or a constitutional republic, a limited government.
But why not a Roman republic, though? That seems kind of cool.
Okay.
That seems kind of cool, actually.
Well, I think it's just because, like, just given that it became, like, I don't know. I guess it's because I focus too much on the empire than the republic. I mean, it's not that I know more about the empire than the republic. It's just like, yeah, but it's kind of like, not that I'm saying, it's kind of like it ended up leading to an empire, and that's just kind of how it is.
Also, under democratic governments, I'd like to point out their foreign policy tend to be different compared to a monarchy.
How so?
Like, if you read Democracy, The God That Fell Watch, or Trudy Song video, Monarchy and Democracy, democratic governments tend to have a more interventionist policy, if anything else, just the expansionist policy or police action. Under a monarch, they view under a monarch. If my memory is correct, truly Thomas Hans Jefferson Harper said that the monarch will have a more emotional interest in the soldiers, and they view them, They want the war as quickly as possible because due to the loss of human life and more the loss of, their income.
I guess I could see that. I'd be interested to see some data.
Yeah, you can watch through the sound video, read Democracy, the guy that failed by Hans Jefferson Harper. You got some data.
Okay.
Yeah. Any thoughts on that? Seal Drift 7?
No.
And I wanted to quick say the thought I had about knowing more about the Roman Empire than the Roman Republic. I think most people know more about the Roman Empire than the Roman Republic just because their transition to empire is what made them famous.
Kind of remind me of Star Wars, actually.
Yeah, because, you can blame government schools if you want to. I don't know if you want to, but when we studied Rome in school, where I went to school, we didn't focus too much on the Republic, but we did focus a lot on the Empire.
Yeah, I wonder how complicated Roman politics were back then.
I don't know. Maybe that's another thing, because it did seem pretty complicated when I was looking at when we were studying it. I was like, this don't make sense.
Yeah. Our politics don't make any sense right now, so just
No, it doesn't.
that's the thing. Like
It used to.
Like that's the thing. Politics always been theater since the formation of government.
Mm-hmm. And that's what I think. Like I said, the weakness of a republic is that it still retains the problems of democracy. It just happens slower. I mean, I believe the founding fathers believed in a small government with only a few specifically enumerated powers, and for the first 100 years of American history, we had that. The problem is, after Woodrow Wilson's presidency, he fundamentally changed the way people thought about the federal government. In that, prior to Woodrow Wilson,
Federal Reserve.
The Federal Reserve, but
state from the beginning.
Sorry,
it was, but I'm saying more broader. Prior to Woodrow Wilson, it was commonly understood that the federal government only has those powers that are explicitly granted to it in the Constitution. Woodrow Wilson changed that. His philosophy was, if the Constitution does not explicitly forbid the federal government from having a power, then the federal government has it. And that's how he went by justifying the Federal Reserve and everything else he did.
Like that's the only reason why he got away with it, because the Federal Reserve is still technically considered to be a private bank.
Yeah, private banking cartel.
Yeah,
It is a private banking cartel. That's how they've managed to avoid audit all these years. They say we're not a government agency, so we're not subject to Freedom of Information Act requests.
That's the thing. We could just end the legal tenders and bring back the gold standard and have a decentralized banking system. I mean, it's that simple. Simple. And that will.
Can we include silver?
Plus, that will shrink the government so dramatically. Why do you think they're able to sustain these foreign policies, these disasters, economic disasters?
Who said something about silver?
I did.
Okay, yeah, I think we could. And even when we were on the quote-unquote gold standard, the U.S. Treasury still maintained vaults of silver, so yes.
That's the only reason why. That's the only reason why we have big military in the first place. It's due to the Federal Reserve making money out of thin air.
Mm-hmm.
Military-industrial complex.
And the sad thing is that one, if we do that, hey, it'd be a miracle. Because, Ron Paul tried to do that like multiple times, but he was ignored.
Yeah.
And you have
I left his wagon.
And just like imagine if we just end legal tenders to the Federal Reserve and have a decentralized banking system, a free banking system with a universal gold standard or precious metals, the government would be so much smaller and society would be more prosperous.
Oh yeah, exactly. JFK was saying the same thing before his head got blown up.
Oh, I wonder why. But then LBJ came along, and Richard Nixon came along as well.
Yeah.
I wish I had that on tape.
Actually, I like Richard Nixon. Thought he's interesting.
He's a Keynesian, so I wouldn't recommend his economic policies.
I know. Like, the thing is, I give this to Richard Nixon. He was a highly effective politician. That's the thing. He was very effective as a politician.
Oh yeah, he was, no doubt about it.
He was very pragmatic, knowing what he was trying to do. But I think they messed up with his monetary policy. I think you said that reopening relationship with China was a mistake.
I said that?
I think you said that, or
Oh yeah, I think it was, yeah.
it's just so why did Nixon do that actually?
Well, I don't know. I think it was because, I mean, you could argue other different kinds of reasons. I remember watching a documentary on because I used to want to go to the military. I think I told you that, but for health reasons, that's not possible. I was studying the Vietnam War. Apparently, what happens is there was belief, we're not sure, that he was trying to talk to China, trying to get China to get North Vietnam to stop doing all their aggression and everything, but that didn't work because even despite both being communist countries, you go to the history between Vietnam and China, those two countries hated each other for thousands of years.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it's funny because I remember when Jason Unruh, you all know who that is, right?
That guy deserved to be shot or physically removed.
I remember he made a video because Vietnam and China to this day still don't like each other that much very well. To a certain extent, they still do because they're both communist countries, technically. But he made a video a few years ago when Vietnam was doing military drills or something, and he was saying, Vietnam and China, you two used to be brothers and capitalism tore you apart. And I'm like, what? I mean, first of all, these are communist countries. Okay, number one, these are communist countries run by communist parties. And number two, the hatred for these two countries go back thousands of years.
Plus, if my memory is correct, I think the Chinese culture kind of have a test for merchants, actually.
And like I said, the hatred for these two countries go back thousands of years. Because China used to rule parts of Vietnam, and then the Vietnamese kicked them out, and they're like, oh, now we hate each other now.
No, that's the crazy. That's the thing. That's the funniest thing I ever heard today.
But yeah, another thing you said about Nixon and China, did you say something about his war policy you thought was wrong?
His monetary policy, but
yeah, well, I think how he handled the Vietnam War. I mean, yeah, I know it was LBJ who got us into it, but I just think even if you wanted to get out, I just think his version of getting out was probably not the best idea.
I can't believe Jason Unruh said that capitalism drove these countries apart. No, it's due to culture differences.
Well, I don't know. I mean, half the time they seem the same, except for the food. They eat this thing called pho in Vietnam. I've had it once. It's all right, I guess, just without the spicy stuff.
Yeah, I heard Vietnam is still horribly poor.
I mean,
that's due to state capitalism, though.
Well, they did what China did with Deng Xiaoping in the 80s, but I wouldn't call them this great economic success. No, I wouldn't say that. No.
Just due to I think it's due to nearly 30 years of socialist policies.
I know.
But no, that's not real socialism. Socialism is the workers control. I kind of hate that definition. It's so narrow.
Yeah.
Like I
Well-
kind of hate that definition of socialism because, for one, it centralizes control over
Repeat that definition of socialism again.
the workers' controls of the means of production.
Yeah, I understand socialists who like the hardcore socialists who say that's the real definition of socialism. I understand where they're coming from, but by the same token, quote unquote democratic socialism, where you have a market economy, and just like redivide the money so that everybody has the same. That might not be owning the means of production, but it still seeks to achieve the same end as socialism. So
I don't know. I just find socialism as the root as the. I think socialism as core just essentially planned economy.
essentially planned economy.
And you all know that many socialists will go out their way, no matter what it takes, to make sure that National Socialism is not socialism.
Mm-hmm.
It is. Even if it's not, still, it has the same amount of collectivism. So I'm sorry, guys.
I love Scotty M.
Well, I'm not just talking about his videos, but like when you face it, even if let's say it wasn't socialism, Nazism and fascism, let's say they weren't socialism, which they are. They all come from socialism. Yes. They have socialist roots. But the thing is, let's say they weren't. They still share the same amount of collectivism as communism, basically. And that's the thing. Another thing I wanted to talk about, since we were just talking about Vietnam. And we're just talking about, well, that's not true socialism. It's kind of funny because, because a lot of people say, well, Hitler was right wing because he was nationalistic and he was anti-communist. Well, okay, well, in the Vietnam War, everybody knows communist North Vietnam, and then there was the Republic of Vietnam, South Vietnam, which was the republic we were helping. Most of the South Vietnamese leaders and the political parties in South Vietnam, they weren't, some of them were socialists, like not like Marxist-Leninist socialists, but like European-style socialism, social democracy, those kind of things.
Hang on quick. I just got to say, this has been awesome. I got to take off. Voltaire, thanks for having me, and hopefully we can all talk again.
Bye, 2 cents.
Bye.
See you later. But like that's what I was saying. Like South. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I just want you to keep on going.
Well, no, that's what I was trying to say. Like, so wait a minute. Like, if you're nationalistic and anti-communist, that doesn't mean you can't be a socialist or left wing or anything.
That's the thing. One of the main arguments saying that Hitler is a right winger because he hated the Bolsheviks and the Marxists. But
if you notice, if you go through history, socialism has been around way before communism.
Just
really?
like
communism.
Actually, communism been around since the ancient Greece. The idea of socialism, anyway, been around since ancient Greece.
Well, that's like the thing. Like they like to say, well, capitalism did this in the ancient times, did that. No, it didn't. Because like both socialism and communism, both of them have been around. Like socialism and capitalism, I mean, they've been around for like what, a few hundred years. Like capitalism, for example, it's only been around for like a few hundred years. But corporations and privatization, that thing's been around for thousands of years. So you can't just say, well, because a lot of socialists like to make the argument, well, if you're for privatization, you're automatically a capitalist.
No, it doesn't, because China did implement some privatization, and even under the Soviet Union after Stalin, but they were pretty heavily socialist.
Yeah, like that's what I was like trying to say. Like they try to say, well, like I was just talking about the Vietnam War, North Vietnam and South Vietnam. They think, well, all South Vietnam is anti-communist and they're backed by the U.S. So obviously they must be a capitalist country. No, they weren't. If anything, they were a mixed economy. They were basically a social market economy.
That's the thing. Like China, I don't consider China to be capitalist. It's still, to me, it's still pretty socialist. Like in its economy, plus their economy. This is why I think this is why I kind of laughed at the neocons worry about China invading. Their economy and their army and their society is really crappy. It's such crap. Plus, their economy is still heavily unstable. It's still unstable.
Well, hopefully their military is not like what it used to be in the Korean War. Because, yeah, I mean, yeah, they didn't have like advanced weapons like they do now, like they did back then. But back then, they were just able to just like charge over a hill with thousands of guys in the Korean War.
I think they still can do that actually.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. But that's what it was like in Korea. Like they would like use guerrilla tactics to like sneak up upon us undetected, and before we know it, we see a bunch of guys coming down a hill.
Banzai!
And all we can do, that's Japanese.
I know, but I view all Asian cultures to be the same, so call me racist.
Well, I could explain the differences, but that'll probably take too long.
Don't care.
That's okay. But just for the record, the nunchucks, if you want it, are not Chinese.
I know they're Japanese.
Well, you could say Japanese now, but they were invented in Okinawa, which at the time was like known as Rikyu or the Rikyu Kingdom.
Yeah.
Because Okinawa, it's now part of Japan, but the Japanese, it used to be its own country, then Japan invaded it.
I forgot how perilous Japan was.
Yeah.
Just it seemed like the Chinese culture. Well, it seemed like the Chinese culture or itself is still pretty anti-capitalist because if my memory is correct, they didn't really like merchants. They view merchants very lowly. Plus, I call China almost like a neo-feudalistic society because it still doesn't allow because it still takes a long time to get out of poverty because I really hate to be poor in China of all places.
Yeah, excuse me, I'm coughing some stuff up.
If you can tell if a country is more prosperous, just take a look at their economic freedom index.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you could make the argument that China is not known for being capitalist. And here's another thing that socialists like to argue. They like to call Chiang Kai-shek a capitalist and the KMT capitalists because they were anti-communist and they're backed by the United States. Well, they still exist today, but now they're a political party in Taiwan. But the thing is, when they first started, the founders like Sun Yat-sen, Chiang Kai-shek, and all those other people, they were socialists, but they weren't Karl Marx socialists. They were like,
at least they weren't retarded.
They were I wouldn't say national socialists because they weren't like, oh, the Chinese are the pure race. Well, maybe they were. It just didn't seem like they advocated for that, but they were for nationalism and socialism and so forth. And they were like a national socialism, like nationalist socialism. And I'll just say that instead, national socialism.
All right. There are also different type of capitalism.
Well, I mean, I consider myself a capitalist, but I'm not a libertarian or an ANCAP. I'm a conservative.
I don't know.
Or you can call me a center-rightist. Sometimes I don't know what I am, but you can either say I'm a center-rightist, a Birkin conservative, or a...
I don't know. I consider yourself to be like a paleo libertarian or conservative.
Nah, I used to be a libertarian because here's the thing. Up until I was 18, I identified myself with the Democratic Party. I was never registered a Democrat or anything, but because I came from a mostly Democrat family, that's kind of what I associated myself with. But as I got older, and like I said, I guess I was never a very good Democrat to begin with because I was always for the right to bear arms and everything. I mean, yeah, sure, there was one point where I was like, yeah, I'm for the right to bear arms, but maybe we could do something about banning fully automatics. But I'm completely over that. I'm 100% pro-gun now, so you don't have to worry. So when it comes to gun policies, you got nothing to fear from me because I'm pro-gun. But what happened is when I was about 18, I went from being a Democrat to a libertarian. But then I kind of realized I wasn't really liked by other libertarians. They just accused me of being a fake libertarian. They even called me a neocon. I'm like, why would you call me a neocon? Why not just call me a conservative? And then some of the my social policies, which I didn't think too much about, started to kick in. That's why I kind of went over more towards conservatism.
Well, what's your social policies?
Well, I'm pro-life. I'm sorry to those that are pro-choice. I'm pro-life.
Every libertarian should be pro-life.
Well, I guess gay marriage is okay. I don't got a problem with gay marriage.
Me neither.
But as long as, they don't force the church to marry them, as long as they keep it out of the church and all that stuff, I'm okay with that.
I agree with you.
If the church wants to marry them, fine, but don't force the church to marry you if they don't want to. But because I do consider myself Christian as well. Is immigration a social policy? Because there's some people who say it's not. I'm like, yeah, it is. I'm like, yes, I'm against illegal immigration. I don't care if you want to come here, as long as you can speak the language. You don't have to speak it completely. Just speak enough to get by, and you also cannot be carrying any contagious diseases like Ebola. I remember back in 2014, there was that guy who came over here from West Africa. He had Ebola, and he just wandered around Dallas, Texas, and he eventually died from it. And who knows what he was touching the entire time he was here. I mean, that's contagious. So, if I get caught bigoted for saying I don't want people who can't speak the language and are carrying contagious diseases that are deadly, I don't want those people coming over here. You want to call me a bigot? Go ahead. I don't care.
I don't know. Most of your policies seem pretty libertarian, actually.
And yeah. I'm a little bit. I'm kind of 50-50 on drug policies. I'm for ending the war on drugs, but as legalizing drugs, yeah, I'm not gonna say.
Yeah, you told me. Oh, yeah, you told me about that.
Yeah, I mean, some I may be open-minded to, but others, no. I'm sorry.
Gun drugs definitely should be legalized. Marijuana.
Well, like I said, it's known as the gateway to other drugs, but like I said, I guess to a certain extent it's okay, but I just think I don't know, maybe it'll just have to, maybe like you said, maybe it'll just have to come down to a libertarian thing, an individual responsibility thing. But at the same time, I just don't think legalizing drugs, especially just all at once, is not a good idea. Even if it is a good,
definitely not all at once.
I know, because where I grew up, I mean, I grew up. Well, the town I grew up in, where I just moved from last month, I just moved to another place. I lived there for 20 years. It was mostly okay, a couple bad neighborhoods, but the town right next to us, we had the small town next to us. It was known for high drug abuses, and people were literally fighting each other over this shit. People would get high, people would be on drugs and do all type of crazy shit. Excuse me, I have a phone call.
What's your thoughts on the war on drugs?
Me?
Yeah.
Well, the war on drugs kills more people than drugs do.
My thoughts on the war on drugs. I think the policy was designed to get more votes and to also disenfranchise many minority communities.
I'll be back in a minute. I just got a phone call. I'll be back in just a few minutes.
No worries.
Where did soldiers stay?
Huh?
Where did soldiers stay? Like, is he coming back?
Yeah, he's got a phone call.
No,
I
because
think
like
he's
I
coming back.
was just saying that that the war that I'm just saying that policy was designed to garner more votes, and
What
just it's still
about
it's
what about the drug cartels within the government? What are your thoughts
like
on
the
that?
CIA.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, uh, if they should be transparent about it, and they probably should end it because for some reason our government is more moral than other people, and just it's just saying just the idea of government should be more moral than other people, more virtuous than other people. They should stop doing that to set a example that us little people can follow.
Yeah.
Then again, I'd be highly sarcastic, and I'm not surprised by this.
Okay, sorry about that. I had a telephone call.
Yeah, it happens, dude.
Yeah, it's life.
What I miss?
Oh, we're just talking about the war on drugs and what these policies were designed to do.
Well, like I said, if you want to end the war on drugs, I'm fine with that for the most part. Just depends on the situation. Like I know, like some terrorist organizations, like they run operations through drugs. Some terrorist organizations do that.
What about government institutions like the CIA?
What do I think of the CIA?
Like they're
Yeah.
selling drugs.
Yeah.
No, I don't endorse that. No, I don't. I mean, unless if it's like undercover work where they have to pretend to be drug cartels in order to like get to other drug cartels to take them down. Unless if it's something like that, I can't endorse that. I can't really endorse dirty work unless if it's really, really necessary. Because I understand. I mean, I understand. Like I said, I'm not in the spy business. I'm not in the CIA or anything. I get the fact that the spy business is a dirty business because that's just the fact. That's the fact. It doesn't matter if it's CIA, KGB, whatever. It's a dirty business at the end of the day.
Yeah.
I understand that, but at the same time, I don't think that means we should endorse every single dirty trick in the book. Is all I'm saying. It should only be used if really necessary. Like if it was like a do or die situation, like we got to use dirty tactics, otherwise we may not get information on a nuclear weapon that could explode in a week from now. Well, if it was like something like that, yes, the gloves are off. Do what you gotta do.
That means should we invade Russia then if we found some information that they plan to attack America?
No.
I don't see why.
Uh-oh.
I would say let the Ukrainians do it.
Oh man. Oh, speaking of Russia, what's going on with Ukraine now? I haven't been keeping up with it.
Not much lately. I mean, I actually looked into it. Really not too much. Like as for the fighting, if that's what you mean, not too much.
Like what I heard from Luis Marrero that the population was welcoming the Russians army.
Well, I guess it depends on what part of Ukraine he was talking about. If he's talking about all of Ukraine, no. The western and central Ukraine despise the Russians, and it's not just Ukraine. Like pretty much almost every Eastern European nation hates the Russians.
That makes sense because they were under an iron current for like nearly a half a century.
No, not just the Soviet Union, but the Russian Empire as well, and that's kind of what I think of Vladimir Putin. I do kind of think of him as an imperialist. Like, yeah, he may not be like advocating imperialism now, but a part of me thinks that yeah, he wants to rebuild the Russian Empire. Like he wants Poland back, he wants Finland back, he wants the Baltics back, he wants He wants Belarus back. I feel like he does want them all back.
And it's just like I think like what about NATO? Is NATO just is the only thing that prevented him to doing that?
Well, I don't know, dude. Like, I think like I think I've always advocated for this, like for a military policy. Like, I was just thinking about this. Like, I think since if Russia and China are a problem for us, I think one of the best things we could do right now is get in between their legs, if you know what I mean.
Well, some NATO still have to exist then.
Well, yeah, but what I'm
dismantle NATO.
What I mean is like get in between their legs, like if the country that's between Russia and China, Mongolia, aka the land of Genghis Khan.
That's the thing. I don't trust the Russian government, but that's the thing. I think the ultimate goal of the Russian government is see the NATO to be dismantled, so they can do what they want and when they want to.
Yeah, which is why I don't trust Putin. I mean, I'm not saying I'm really fond of NATO nowadays because I feel like a lot of changes. Because I feel like it's not that I think that NATO's useless. I just feel like it definitely needs a lot of changes, and I think the problem with NATO is that I think that it also has to run certain things by the European Union, which we all know that's trouble right there. Like, no, the European Union and NATO shouldn't have to collaborate on any single thing. Because
isn't the European Union like a world government experiment?
No, but they try to get people to join them. Luckily, the Swiss don't want to be. Switzerland doesn't want to be part of the EU and all that stuff. But like the thing is what the EU doesn't understand, NATO is not made up of just European nations. It's made up of the United States and Canada.
Yeah.
So it's like we shouldn't have, because like the NATO headquarters is where the EU headquarters is, and I'm kind of like, can we find a new headquarters for NATO? And here's another thing, like, I think that I don't know what the gun policies are like in Poland or Ukraine or the Eastern European countries, but I think like let's say if Putin does really try to bring back the Russian Empire and he does expand in the other countries. I think, we should try to, maybe influence, I don't know what the gun policies are like in the rest of the European nations, but I think, they should advocate, if they have strict gun laws, they should probably allow more, they should probably, kind of loosen that, allow more gun laws, maybe even train Polish civilians in guerrilla warfare. In case if the Russians decide they want to take back Poland and rebuild the Russian Empire.
Oh, I think there's going to be another election.
In Russia? Or Poland?
It's world politics are so confusing and complicated.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, they are.
Why we can't just support free trade and voluntary transaction among businesses and have our nations mind their own damn business?
Well,
yeah,
that's a problem. That's kind of why I'm not really completely libertarian or ANCAP. I mean, yes, I agree. I think free trade is a much better way for peace, but it's kind of like, you ever seen that movie, The Dark Knight?
Yeah.
Remember that one scene where Bruce Wayne, he's like saying criminals are not complicated. We just have to figure out what he's after. He's talking about the Joker, and then Alfred says, technically, this is a man I don't think you fully understand. And he was talking about like his time in Burma, how he was supposed to go look for some jewelry or something like that. Apparently the bandit who stole him threw him away. He just wanted to steal him for fun. And that's the problem. And that's kind of why war is always going to exist no matter what. Is like the part is where Alfred in the movie where he says Some men can't be bought, bullied, or negotiated with. Some men just want to watch the world burn.
Well,
And that's true. And that's true because you got too many people out there who they don't care about free trade. They don't care about what you want. They will do whatever they want, and they will do whatever it takes to get it, even if they have to use violence. That's just a known fact. I don't know why, but you're always going to have those kind of insanity around.
You're right. I agree with you.
I know. I mean, I know. I that's why I consider myself a semi-interventionist, not a fully interventionist or a non-interventionist.
But my thing is, if these countries, these nations want to go to war, let them destroy themselves.
I know. But my question is like, is this country like a problem with us? Like, if this country barks threats at us, but at the same time, there's this other country. At the same time, there's this other country that wants to go to war. Because like for the non-interventionist principle, I'm for sometimes, but for sometimes I am for interventionism, depending on the situation.
Yeah, that's the thing. That always have to be dependent on the situation.
I guess I'm what you would call a someone who's half and who's pro and anti half. Like I'm not completely pro-war, but I'm not completely anti-war either.
You're just a centrist.
Yes, on international policies when it comes to the military, yes. Like when people ask me, should we be over here? Should we be over here? Sometimes I'll say yes. Sometimes I will say no. Like for places like because of North Korea and China, I would say yes. I do think there is somewhat of a necessity to stay in Japan and South Korea.
Like I support a strong military intervention for North Korea.
Yeah, and because.
It's got nothing to do about moral reasons. It's just North Korea is just a danger to South Korea and Japan. I know that their nuclear powers is crap, but really, we gotta draw the line in the sand.
Yeah, well, the thing is, the KPA, the hostile nations of the KPA include the United States, Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, Australia, and New Zealand. So yeah, we do need to. I think it would be best to make sure we have a strong alignment with all those countries. And I do think we should. And like I said, I think we do need to maybe try to like improve our relations with Mongolia. Because who remembers when was the last time an American diplomat or politician visited Mongolia?
Actually, I rarely hear anything about Mongolia in the news.
Yeah, but the thing is, the Mongolians, I don't think they like the Chinese they don't like the Chinese, definitely, but they don't like the Russians that much either. Some of them don't.
That makes sense that Mongolians don't like the Chinese.
I know. Well, the Mongols ruled China. The Mongols used to rule China, but then eventually the Chinese turned the tables on them when China became the Manchu dynasty. Because then they end up ruling Mongolia.
So just that hate relationship.
Yeah, it's like, you got all these Eastern European countries that hate Russia. You got all these Asian countries that hate China. It's like, the fuck?
I think every Asian country hates China.
Yeah, almost. Just about. The South Koreans, except for North Korea, maybe, and I guess Russia. Because Russia's technically both part of Europe and Asia, so unless you want to count Russia as the Asian part of Russia, I don't know.
That's the thing. I think at this point, that the Chinese government are getting tired of North Korea.
Yeah. Oh, and that's another thing. Improve our relations with India. Because they have a large military and they're the second largest country in the world.
Actually, they should take a more active role in the war on terror.
And what? Well, there's actually been some border recently. There's been some border clashes between the Chinese and the Russians, but nothing big. I
Oh,
remember
not,
that.
man, not enough to start a war?
No.
Dang it.
Oh, do you want a world war?
No, I just want to see China and Russia destroy each other.
Well, China and Russia destroying each other, like that would like benefit us. That would technically benefit us as long as we stood out of it. Just like, yeah, let the Russians and the Chinese kill each other.
Hey,
Well, technically,
the two most corrupt governments fighting each other. Yay!
yeah. Then again, you can't really call like China, say it's China and Russia fighting. It's Russia fighting the Communist Party, because when you think about it, the People's Liberation Army, which is the Chinese military, everything is run by the Chinese Communist Party. Nothing is the official thing of China. It's always the official thing of the Communist Party, like the People's Liberation Army. It's not China's national army. It's the army of the Communist Party. It literally says itself. It pledges it's not China's national army. It's the Communist Party's army.
Yeah.
Same thing in North Korea. The Korean People's Army, Communist Party.
Actually, they stand consistently. They have like the fourth or fifth most active army in the world.
North Korea?
Yeah.
Well, it has believed that they may have done some secret work in like the Middle East.
North Koreans? Mm.
Yeah, well, some say that they're digging ditches in Syria, which I don't know if that's true or not.
I don't see the self-interest in that.
Well, the North Koreans consider, well, I guess because since they're allies with Iran, they consider Israel to be an enemy too, because they're an enemy of Iran, which is another country I'm worried about. Iran, ISIS, and Iran. Those are my big concerns of the Middle East.
Why are you worried about Iran?
Well, because they chant "Death to America," and
I can see why once you overthrow their leader.
yeah, but that was 38 years ago. I mean, granted, I'm not trying to make excuses, but at the same time, I just don't think it's fair for future generations to pay the penalty. So
I don't support military intervention in Iran.
And another problem is yes, they literally claim that they want to nuke us, and if you remember, before Obama left office, he and John Kerry and the Iran deal, which reminds me. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I'm not really worried about Iran obtaining nuclear weapons. I'm not worried about that.
I actually am, since Barack Obama kind of helped them already.
Like, well, I just think I don't like if they attain nuclear weapons. I don't see them using them because one, they have to face NATO and Israel. In the United States, they got to face the entire world if they do develop nuclear weapons.
Yeah, but we also have to remember their allies with Beijing and Moscow.
That's the thing. Why would they want to fire a nuclear weapon? That's the mutually assured destruction. Just plus, there's still doubt about it. I think Israel got nuclear weapons, but this is not confirmed by anyone.
I don't know. We might as well just give it to them and say, hey, if you two need to fight it out, just do it already.
Plus, what I can tell, I think Iran only ostracized enough nuclear materials for medical reactors. Like, it's really expensive to build a nuclear bomb.
Yeah, but the thing is they could still give it to the terrorist organizations they fund.
Oh, right. Yeah, let's destroy. One thing I hope is that they will completely dismantle ISIS.
Yeah. Well, ISIS, Iran, yeah, the Taliban, yeah, those are a problem.
When did the Mongol? Oh wait, I'm reading live chat. Jin Jesus said intervention DPRK would be a disaster. The whole country would be a hostage situation. I don't know. Just that's this thing. I don't know about that, Jim Jesus, because because I'm tired of North Korea playing this political game of chicken, and these people kind of deserve to be liberated from a oppressive regime. Do you think that North Korea just gonna get themselves peacefully, or should we just leave North Korea to be another example of the failure of socialism or communism?
Well, well, we all know it's a failure. There's no doubt about that. But as for this, what's he gonna do next? As for that, what's he gonna do next? Are we gonna react or not? Part of me is just kind of like, I've heard enough talk already.
Like,
Are we gonna do something or not?
that's the thing. That's the thing. Like,
But because like this thing, because I think it's pretty clear to say this dude is crazier than his dad. We all thought he was going to be more moderate and more friendly because he was educated in the West, but obviously not.
oh, I just don't know. I don't know what to do in that situation. Just I know I support a military intervention in North Korea because they're just a existential threat to relations all over the world.
You ever heard of the Bay of Pigs invasion?
Yeah.
You ever heard of the North Korean People's Liberation Front?
No.
Well, okay. Well, they're a group. It's a group of North Korean defectors in South Korea who are mostly former North Korean military, they're former North Korean police officers, I guess even some of them are probably even secret police as well. So like my suggestion is like they always make this vow how they want to return and overthrow the Kim dynasty. So I'm just kind of like, okay, let's just give them the weapons and training. Let them do what happened in Bay of Pigs, except hopefully this time it'll be successful. That way,
Bay of Pigs. The reason why it didn't work out so well
is because everybody knew about it. Castro knew about it. It wasn't kept secret enough, and they picked one of the worst places to land. This was a place Castro knew. Castro used to spend fishing trips here. He used to take vacations in this place.
Kind of glad that Castro is dead.
Yeah, but the thing is like, if you're gonna, it's like if you try to break into my house, you try to break into somebody's house, but you choose the one place they spend most of their time at in their house, and let's say they have a gun. Yeah, I don't think it's best to rob somebody when they're in the place they spend most of their time in to enter that way. I know I'm mixing my words up. I know I'm not making sense a little bit, but yeah, that's what I'm trying to say. It's like, yeah, if you're trying to fight somebody in a place that they know a lot about this place, then obviously you're gonna have the outcomes may not be the way you want them.
Yeah, just.
Even if it succeeded, even if the Bay of Pigs succeeded, still, I mean, it would have been like.
Yeah, I think I'm about to end the broadcast.
Okay.
Hope you enjoy the broadcast, people, and hope you like and subscribe to my channel. Peace.
Yeah, thanks